He's also been with the Air Force and has had a wide-ranging experience. And you can read his bio, but because you will definitely want to find out more. But I want to tell you some stuff that you might not know, and which he gave me permission to do. So Brian is he's a PhD. That's why we call him doctor, and Senior VP OpEx for CACI International. And so I asked him, what is the one thing you want the people to know? He says, here's what you get. What you're going to have here today is what you get when you let an engineer design an operational excellence approach, or program, a layered architectural approach to OpEx. So I can't tell you what that means, but we're going to find out. Brief thing about his bio that you might not know that he wouldn't tell you. This, Brian Gallagher, is a high school dropout. He's a former rock band member. He's retired military, and he has a PhD in systems engineering. So that's how that first story. You're going to want to buy him a drink and find out how we went from one extreme to the other. Brian, take it away.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Wow, it's hard to follow that. The introductions were great. You really set the bar high for me to have to talk about enterprise-wide operational excellence. So that's the title, enterprise-wide operational excellence. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not a vendor. I'm not selling a tool. I'm going to share with you the experiences that we have at our company and how we've implemented operational excellence and some of the things that we do and that works for us. And I'm going to give you an example of one of the things that we did recently last year, which is open a shared services center, which was a big change for our organization. So I'm going to kind of walk through that and talk about how we did that. So start a little bit. This is me. That was me. My daughter says I look like Charlie Bucket from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah, so systems software engineering. As I mentioned, I was in the Air Force, so I was a software engineer in the Air Force, a systems engineer, workspace and Intel type systems. Went to Carnegie Mellon University, not as a student, but worked at a research center at Carnegie Mellon University for 12 years, the Software Engineering Institute. That was the home of the CMMI, some of you may be familiar with that. So I did a little bit of that for a few years. Northrop Grumman and now CACI as SVP of Operational Excellence. All right, so a little bit about the company, just to give you some context. Again, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to kind of set the stage for our journey and what we've done. 20,000 people, 4.5 billion annual revenue. We're all over the place. Headquarters is in Arlington, Virginia, inside Beltway. So we have a very large presence all over the place. So we've got folks all over the U.S., we've got folks overseas, really all over the place. And the thing that we do is we provide solutions and services primarily to the government, DoD, intel agencies, federal agencies, and a very wide variety of things that we do. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a second and again to set the stage. Let's skip that one. It's just all fluff. But here gets to the markets that we serve. So, one of the things you have to figure out is what do you want to do as a company? And you can do anything and everything. And about 7 years ago, we were doing just about anything and everything. We actually ran a bakery on a base. And we had another program that was doing horseshoes, doing shoes for special operations. And we said, you know what, this is probably not what we want to be as a company, just doing everything for everybody, just chasing everything. So we kind of did the hedgehog effect, if you're with that. What is it that we do well? What is it that our customers are going to pay us for? Where is the market going? We did a lot of market analysis and strategy. And we came up with these 12 areas of focus. Now, 12 may still be a lot, right? But we're a big company. We do a lot of things. So very diverse set of programs, very diverse set of customers that we deal with. Things like we've got the largest pay and personnel system in the world that we're developing and deploying. It's called HIPS Army, Integrated Pay and Personnel System for the Army. So the U.S. Army is going to a brand new pay and personnel system, and we're the prime integrator for that contract, developing that in a PeopleSoft kind of rollout. That's for the Army, the National Guard, the Reserves. It's a big program. We also manage what's called CAMO, which is the Air Force Satellite Control Network. So the Air Force flies a lot of the satellites that do communications up. And we know where they are. We track where they're at. We do command and control. We schedule the usage of those satellites. That's one of the programs that we have. So we maintain that worldwide, the Air Force Satellite Control Network. Those two examples just to show the extreme, right? One is kind of mission-critical systems engineering, where we've got mission-critical software, mission-critical kinds of activities. The other is a pay and personnel system, an information system that we're deploying. We also have programs where we deploy intel analysts in weird locations around the world, or linguists that do things for the government. We also have a big program with OPM that does background investigations. If you've ever had a security clearance, somebody comes and knocks on your door and does an interview. We have about 1,300 people in our company that do that around the world for OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. So a very diverse set of things. It really falls in these 12 areas, and I can go on and on about the stuff in here. But just to give you a sense, we have about 600 programs. And we call a program anything over $2 million or above in annual revenue. Some are much larger than that. So we have a lot of programs that we're managing for a very diverse set of customers around the world. We have 3 strategies, so very, very simple. Win new business. We want to win more than our fair share of business in those 12 areas. We want to win all of our recompetes. So the government typically gives you a contract for a set period of time, and if it's an ongoing kind of contract, they'll recompete it after that. We want to win all of our recompetes. Perform with operational excellence, and that's what we'll talk about here. That's one of our 3 main strategies, and that means we're exceeding our customers' expectations, and we're doing it in a way that makes money for the company as well as benefits the customer. That's operational excellence. And then grow through acquisition. So our company in the last 25 years or so has had about 60 acquisitions. So we do a lot of acquisitions. In fact, we closed on one 2 weeks ago. 1,300 people came into the company. About 3 months ago, another 1,000 people we closed in the company that came and integrated in. So you can imagine, bringing people into the culture, making sure that they understand how we operate. It's a very big challenge for the company. So that's kind of our 3 main areas of strategy. So for us, here's how we've defined operational excellence. And this is probably familiar to a lot of folks here. You've heard something similar to this. But first, we want to make sure that every single employee understands how what they do on a day-to-day basis contributes to our end customer's mission. Right? So if you're doing invoices, or if you're in procurement, or if you're embedded with the customer, we want everybody to understand how their job contributes to the end user's customer. And when they see something that's going to impact that delivery, they do something about it. And as Kevin Dugan would say, without management intervention, right? They fix it. And we call it the find and fix it, right? You find a problem, you fix the problem. And so that's kind of that continuous improvement, operational excellence mindset. However, sometimes you get a problem like this, right? It's not just a find and fix it kind of thing. It's not just you've got your normal workflow, you've got your abnormal workflow. This isn't an abnormal workflow. This is something where you've got to rally the forces to really do something big with the company. And so we're doing those small incremental things, we're improving performance, but we're also tackling some very large things, like integrating big companies into our culture. And the example I'm going to give today is setting up a shared services center, which is a big undertaking for us as well. So this is the layered architecture. And I have a hard time sometimes explaining this to people because they look at it and say, I don't get it, but let me try. The way I look at our organization and operational excellence is there's a value stream. Right? There's a value stream from us to our customer. So if you think about a layered architecture, if an engineer, you think about an ISO stack or a layered architecture, usually at the top of the architecture is the value to the customer or the application. It's the thing that somebody sees. That layer then is supported by the next layer, which is supported by the next layer, and so forth. So if you think about what we do, we help our customers achieve their mission. So that's the very top layer of our architecture. And that mission is enabled by the solutions and services that we provide as a company. Those solutions and services are delivered by programs, and those programs are supported by our infrastructure. So for us, when we think about operational excellence, we're looking across the entire architecture to look for things to improve. If you've ever been involved in maybe theory of constraints, I use it all the time. I like the critical thinking tools that they use. But the thing that always bothered me about theory of constraints was they said, okay, line up your constraints, and then they kind of pass through that. How do you find those constraints? Where do you know to look in the first place for those constraints within your process? For us, we want to make sure our radar screen is wide enough so that we can find those constraints across the board. And it's a mix of affordability and innovation to find those constraints and fix things. So just a couple things here. We have a lot of people that are embedded with our customer, in their workspace. So we have people that, the contract says, give me 50 people that are left-handed pancake turners, right? I want you to show up at this location, and we'll tell them what to do. Well, they're there with the customer mission all the time. Really not pancake turners, they're Intel analysts, they're doing mission kinds of things. So they're looking at the customer mission. We also have solutions and services that we provide. So I mentioned the pay and personnel service, the Air Force Satellite Control Network activity. We have a product that we sell called Sky Tracker, which is an anti-drone system. So think about critical infrastructure. If they have drones flying in the critical infrastructure, we have a system that detects those, shuts them down, or takes them over. That's one of the products that we provide. So we're looking at innovations in the solutions and services area as well. And then how we manage programs. So our structure for programs. How much quality assurance do you need? How much risk management do you do? How much risk do you take on? How do you manage your critical suppliers in your supply chain? So thinking about how we do our program activities. And then the infrastructure. So things like how are we organized? What kinds of benefits do we offer people? What's our job families for our folks? So we're looking across all those different areas. Sometimes when people do an operational excellence kind of program, they'll focus on maybe one layer of this architecture. They'll think about, well, maybe we're just going to focus on how we do our solutions and services and not think about the rest. But if you think about it as a layered architecture, those solutions and services are supported by programs that are supported by our infrastructure. And if we can do some things here that are innovative and address affordability, they're going to support that entire stack. So that's how we think about operational excellence. We look at it through all these different layers. Okay, so here's the example I want to give. It's about dramatically reducing transactional costs. So, I was talking about some of the neat things we do in the customer area. I'm going to talk about something that's kind of back office. It's a transactional kind of activity. So what we found was a lot of our improvement activities really were focused on these upper layers, right? Programs, solutions and services, and so forth. And not so much on the lower level here. Our focus was external customer focused kind of activity. So what happens over time is you start to get a lot of inefficiencies in those other layers. Back offices, people have been doing it forever. Our company's been around 55 years. I don't think we've had anybody that's been with the company 55 years, but we've had people that were there a long time, a lot of tribal knowledge, if you will, that people knew how to do things, especially in those back office areas. And it was very expensive. Our transactional kinds of activities were where our headquarters is at. It's in the DC area, very high cost of living area. So it was very expensive, had inefficiencies, redundancies, and it was leading to external as well as internal customer satisfaction issues. You think about getting an invoice out the door, or making sure that we're doing something, doing a procurement on time, or those types of things. So without dramatic change, we felt that our business objectives were being threatened. So think about if we're going to acquire another company that has 5,000 people or 1,000 people. That strain on that kind of fragile infrastructure wasn't very good. So we needed to do something there. So I'm going to talk about it in terms of CMI. I mentioned theory of constraints. We do Lean Six Sigma. Whatever methodology you use, we found CMI for services was a very good match for what we were doing in setting up our shared services center. So I'm going to talk about the areas of CMI that address risk management, managing performance, strategic service management, service delivery management, incident resolution and prevention and continuity, and also some sprinkles in service system deployment and so forth. So what does this do for us? Why do we use a model like this? If you're standing up something like we did, a shared services center, and you want to know what good looks like, what does good service delivery look like? You go to something like this as a standard to look at. Some people use ISO 20K, anybody do ISO 20K? ISO 20K is IT service management. We were doing non-IT service management, right? We were doing contracts, procurement. We did have our IT help desk, but beyond IT, so we wanted something that would help us stand up a service delivery, a world-class service delivery organization. So we used CMI to help us do that. So I'm going to talk about these things as we go through. So first of all, we did an extensive study. We decided to stand up our shared services center in a lower cost of living area, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So most of our operations are in DC, And now we're going to move a large set of things to Oklahoma City. So right now you're starting to take risk, right? We've got risk up there. You also have to think about, strategic service management, which means what are the services you're going to provide? How do you document those? How do you make sure that they're deployable and so forth? So that provided us the opportunity to collect those things that were done over 55 years, kind of different in different locations, and standardize them, refresh them, make sure they have repeatable performance, tier those up to a single organizational structure, because all those things reported to different areas, but put it in one location. And finally, lower cost of living areas. So Oklahoma City was lower cost. For us, this is about 300 FTE. So we moved 300 positions. We didn't move people. We moved those positions to Oklahoma City. So I think you guys who do change management think about that, right? It's a big risk. It's a big concern doing something like that. So as we went through, we had to figure out, well, which services do we want to move? And we decided we were going to move transactional services. Services where somebody is in a back office who gets a request to do something and processes that request and gives it to our internal customers. So these are the areas of contracts, procurement, HR, finance, information systems, and security. Security being processing of clearances and passing security requests and so forth. This is just an example in the area of contracts. So under each one of these things, these are service areas, they had additional things that they did. In contracts, it was things like customer complaints and contract closeout, Freedom of Information Act requests, and so forth. So those are the kinds of things that were being moved, where everybody kind of knew it was Charlie, right? We go down to the office here, we talk to Charlie, you can do my rough order of magnitude. Now it's going to be somewhere in the middle of the country, and I'm going to pick up the phone, and I'm not sure who I'm going to get. Right? So there's a lot of risk associated with that as well. So we had to define the service system. Again, these evolved over 55 years. We had to do extensive planning. So in some cases, it was all up in people's heads, right? They didn't have written down procedures. So we had to make sure our policies, our procedures, everything mapped, everything aligned to what we wanted it to do. And we were trying to get this out of people who we've already told, you're no longer going to be with the company after we stand this up. Right? That's really tough to do. We've got 300 people who are working for the company, and the last thing we want them to do is, can you write down what it is you do? It's very, very challenging, right? We had implemented a common request system. So in the past it was, I know I call Matt or I know I call Sally, but we had a common request system, an interactive voice system, as well as a ServiceNow. ServiceNow is what we use to stand this up. We also defined nominal processing. So we not only, what does it mean to do the right thing, but what happens when things go bad? What is that? What's the checklist, if you will, for when things go bad? And we based this all on our current workload. So here we are kind of trying to figure out what size we need, what capacity we need, based on a system that's not well defined. So there was going to be some iteration, and we knew we were going to have some struggles as we went along. So that was kind of where we started off. Again, up here, the CMY areas that helped us, managing performance and measurement, so that measurement piece, IRP, incident response and prevention. So you're delivering the system, you're looking at incidents, you're responding to those kinds of activities. Service delivery management, how do you deliver services? And again, strategic service management. So there was guidance in that model that helped us establish those things as we went through. So transitioning was a big deal, right? So we were having to move all these services that were being operated in one place to a new place. And so we used ORRs, operational readiness reviews. So if you're an engineer, you're familiar with those. Before you deploy a system, you do an ORR. So we use that concept for each of these services to stand those up. Extensive planning activities to make sure that we had captured the knowledge, that we had trained the new folks, we had hired the new folks, that they understood what their roles were, the tools were available for them to perform. We tested the service, right? We wanted to make sure, is it going to work? In some areas, we had to do parallel operations just to make sure that our risks were reduced in those areas. And we held formal operational readiness reviews for each of our service areas that we deployed. So, what is it now? It's fully operational. Requests are being processed and filled. We've got incidents. We're doing root cause analysis of common problems. Again, we couldn't do this before because it was scattered throughout the DC area where we were doing these kinds of activities. We have SLAs and a standard dashboard for folks to understand what the progress is on our shared services. We're making adjustments, because we kind of guessed, what's the capacity we need. We're finding maybe we need more people in this area versus that area. And we're continuing to capture risks and opportunities as we go forward. Again, all those things up there are process areas that help us do that kind of thing. So one area that we didn't do so well is think about continuity of operations. So kind of an important thing. So as we were going through the ORRs, we started asking, well, what happens if there's a tornado? You know, Oklahoma is kind of known for tornadoes, right? So and what happens if they have an ice storm and the people can't get to their work location? So we had a special activity kind of a little bit late when we started working on this continuity of operations. Things like understanding what the business impact analysis is if a service goes down. What's the impact to the company and the business? Hazard analysis. You see the inclement weather, the tornado. Those are real things that happen in the city, especially because of where they're located. We wanted to make sure that the employees were resilient. So could they work from home? Did they have a generator? Did they have internet access? Could they perform their job from home? Did we have the tools that they needed to work from home? And then service area resilience kind of all bubble up to that as well. So a lot of activity in how do we make sure that we think about resiliency and continuity of operations, which by the way, we never thought about before when we were in the DC area. Nobody even thought about what happens if. We really had to think about it from this perspective when we set up this new activity. So make sure I'm doing okay. All right, good. So what are our next steps? We're going to optimize the service delivery. So now we have common services that are being delivered in one location. And we're going to optimize that. We can kind of manage it over time and improve it over time. We can also look for opportunities to take on more transactional services. So are there other things that we might be able to move to our shared services center? You know, things that we didn't get the first time, things that make sense to be in that location, to be managed in the same kind of way. This enables growth. So again, as I mentioned just a couple weeks ago, we closed on an acquisition, 1,300 people. So in a very short amount of time, we had to bring all those people into our HR systems. We had to give them all badges. We had to give them all cell phones and laptops, teach them how to do things. Our shared services center was vital in that activity, making sure they came on board, and that was done smoothly. So very important. So that's enabling growth. I mentioned we're about 4.5 billion. We have kind of aspirations to get to 10 billion. So doubling in size, and so this is going to help us with that growth activity. The other thing people have asked about, well, okay, you kind of follow CMMI. You want to go and do a formal appraisal and get appraised at a CMMI maturity level. And to us, that's not why we did it. We didn't do it to get a maturity level or to get a check-the-box kind of thing for our shared services center. We did it because it was good practice, and it gave us some things to think about, including maybe we got to think about continuity planning, which we hadn't thought about on our own. It could be a badge of honor for the staff there if we went through that. Could help identify other improvement areas, but right now it's just not a burning kind of thing that we need to do. Again, we used it to help us improve, to help us implement the shared services center, not necessarily to go off and say we're CMMI level X, which is what you don't usually hear from a defense contractor, right? We all want to say we're CMMI level whatever. Okay, so we need to the parts of CMI that help us make that decision. Opportunity and risk management. Is this an opportunity that we want to go after? Is it a risk for us to do additional things as in our strategic needs? Okay, with that pretty quick. I do want to, this is the last page on the shared services center. This is the actual center that's there. It's located in Oklahoma City in an area that was a data center. So it was built for resilience in the first place. It's got redundancy and so forth. We took a part of that. It's a huge complex. We're not the only tenant in that. It's a multi-tenant facility. Dr. Jack London is our executive chairman of the board. He's from Oklahoma City. So we named it the Dr. Jack London Shared Services Center. And it's operational, and they're doing a great job, and we continue to improve as we go through. So a little bit about some of the recognition for our approach to operational excellence. I'll give you that one example. I could go on to give you other examples of how we manage programs. We've done a lot of work in managing programs, in transparency and reporting, in improving our award fees and CPAR scores for our customers. A lot of work in that area. That's part of the architecture that we look at. But this was just one example. These are the kinds of recognition that we get. One thing to note, I did mention CMI. We just went through a CMI for development for our solutions side. maturity level 3 appraisal using version 2.0. I know that's a lot of acronyms and a lot of words there. But it's kind of significant because we're the first company in the United States to go through that. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. We just did that last month. First company in the U.S. We weren't the first company in the world. I'd like to be able to say that. We actually started first, but we were a little bit more deliberate in our appraisal activities. 4 other companies jumped in before us. They ended before we ended. So, first in the U.S., not first in the world. 3 in China, 1 in India that beat us to that. So ISO 9000, QMS, quality management system, 20,000 I mentioned IT security, or IT services management, 27,000 IT security management. As you can imagine, a defense contractor very concerned about how we maintain our networks, our customers' data. And then we have some program-specific things that we do as well. Okay, what I wanted to leave you with, though, was the homework. To say, okay, well, what does it look like for my organization? You know, if I were to think about my organization and how we do business, what does it look like? How many layers do I have? Maybe I've got 6 layers. Maybe I've got 3. Don't know what your organization looks like, but think about it from what's your customer's mission at the very top. The very top of the architecture is your customer's mission. What supports that customer's mission? What supports that? And what supports that? So you think about what are those things, what are those layers within your organization that support your customer's mission. Fill those in, and then start thinking about affordability and innovation. And how do you better help your customer achieve their mission? I think that's it.
We have 3 minutes.
I got 3 minutes for questions, so pretty quick, read through that. Questions, comments? Stunned.
In your definition at the beginning, not with operational excellence, I noticed you used the word teams. How does teams sort of play in all of this?
Yeah, so even if you have a 20,000 or 100,000 person organization, work gets done in teams. Right? So it's typically a team of 7 to 12 people doing work. So we want to make sure that that team, they're empowered to operate in a kind of self-organizing way and perform their duties. So we want to make sure teams understand what they're doing and how individuals support those teams and how those teams support customer mission. So even with a large organization, work gets done in teams.
I thought the name sounded familiar. You acquired my wife. LGS.
LGS, so we just acquired LGS. Great company, LGS Innovations. They've got lots of engineers and technical folks.
Yes, he's a technical writer.
And we're real excited about that acquisition. They have legacy to Bell Labs, if you're familiar with Bell Labs, and that's what they did, and we're real excited about that. 1,300 people, that's just...
And now I know why all the service people will let go, because you have a centralized location.
All right.
Other questions?
I just wanted to know, because we also run a shared services center.
I'd speak up just a little bit so I can hear.
So I just wanted to know, we run a shared services center here as well, and wanted to know how did you handle the knowledge transfer? And it was a big challenge for us. Obviously, people are getting let go, and we want to retain that knowledge.
So it was difficult. You know, as you can imagine, in some areas, nothing was written down, right? So we had to do an extensive amount of policy procedure writing, and in some cases, we extended people out beyond. You know, it wasn't okay, you're done to this day, and now we're handing it over. There were some risk areas. For example, invoicing, right? You want to get paid. You want to make sure that you can still get paid as you go through. So we extended some of those folks to and gave them incentives. So we incentivized them to stay. If you stay, you know, you get this extra amount to help with that knowledge transfer. So part of that was through incentives, extending people, and a lot of that capture. And those ORRs were very, very important because they walked through every one of those areas. You know, did we capture the knowledge, did we train the people, and so forth.
Any other questions, since we have a little bit of time before the next session?
Since you didn't have, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Since you didn't have the processes written down, how did you know, did you do a thorough analysis on those processes to know if you needed to go into a design mode or a problem-solving mode before you just kind of replicated?
Yeah, so we had a standard of what we wanted to see from an output. Right? So from an output, we wanted to make sure we had policies and procedures that supported it, and checklists and so forth. So where there was a gap, we had to go into design mode and capture that knowledge.
Anything else? Terrific. Thank you, Brian.